So when Perry asked me to do this, I instantly thought back to my childhood, and I wanted to share a story that, like many of the speakers up here, give voice to those who do not have a voice. And so I'm going to share a story that pieces I've shared publicly, but one particular portion, and I think when I get to it you'll know what it is, I've never shared publicly, but I wanted to do that here for such a special occasion. And Perry will maybe understand how our worlds collide, and the Student Advocacy Center does such great work. So I want to take you to a place where I grew up. Take you to my neighborhood, to my block, to the street from which raised me. And I want to share those stories because it is those streets and those lessons that impacted me in my educational journey, but also, I think more importantly, for the sake of tonight, how it impacted some of the people who are no longer here with us. So my parents always kept us really close. So our front yard was our playground. And on this particular day, our playground was full of all of our closest friends, my sister and I. And we were out there this day playing this game called Red Light, Green Light, 1, 2, 3, right? Some of you may have heard this game before. If you don't, right, you line up, red light, green light, 1, 2, 3, everyone tries to rush to the front, and the person in the front, as they stop and open their eyes, you all freeze. You're statuesque. And if they find you or they see you moving, they send you back to the beginning. So on this particular day, we're in my front yard, and my friend is spinning, and she says, red light, green light, 1, 2, 3, we all freeze. She starts again, red light, green light, 1, 2, and as she opens her eyes, she stops. And we catch her gaze, and it's staring behind us. And as all the kids begin to look back, mind you, in my neighborhood, we knew everybody. And if there was ever a stranger walking down the street that didn't belong, it was a safety concern. And so we watched frozen as this couple, this man and a woman, walked by us. They passed by us, didn't pay us any attention. And before they got out of sight, we kept playing. Red light, green light, 1, 2, 3. A few moments later, as we're standing, we see the male half of that couple coming back towards us. This time he's panicked, he's rushing, he's pretty much in a slow run. And we stand there and we watch him. And as he gets closer and closer to us, we hear a car revving its engine coming flying down the street towards us. And we just watch. And as that man gets right in front of my house on the sidewalk, the car pulls up onto our lawn. Driver hops out, puts a gun to his face. I hear kids screaming. I see my friends running. But for whatever reason, I was frozen. I was just stuck there. I'm 8 years old, roughly, maybe 9. I'm in the safe confines of my front yard, playing with my friends, in the gaze of my father, and yet there's uncontrollable violence in front of me. He yells some profanities, scoots a little bit closer, and at 8 or 9 years old, I see the anger and the hate on his face, and I know what's about to happen. But yet I can't turn away, I just watch. And he must have seen me out the corner of his eye, because he looked at me, holstered his weapon, said a few more profanities to the man in front of him, got in his car, and drove away. He didn't pull the trigger that day, he didn't kill anybody. But for an 8 or 9-year-old in the safety of their front lawn to see such potential violence, my world was forever changed. And I remember my father talking to me on the porch right after that. I don't remember exactly what he said, something about, why were you standing there staring with the guy with the gun? It was kind of all a blur after that. And just to tell you a little bit how crazy my neighborhood is, 30 minutes later, we're back in my yard playing red light, green light, 1, 2, 3. So I go to bed that night. I wake up the next morning. I get ready for school, and I'm exhausted. I'm tired because I didn't sleep that night because I thought about that big shiny gun and that man standing in my yard. I walk out the door like I do every single morning, but this morning is different. I'm anxious, I'm worried. So I peek out my door down the street from which the car came, and then I hurry to school. I get to the playground, we play, but I'm still anxious. I'm worried. I go into school, the bell rings, the teacher begins to teach, and I sit in my seat, and I can't concentrate. I'm focused on what happened the night before. Sometimes in the neighborhood, life happens, and yet school somehow just keeps on going and going and going. Sometime later, maybe years later, we're on the playground, and I'm with some of my closest friends, Kevin, and Peanut, and Mondor, and Randy. And like Patty said, we had these very unsafe playgrounds back then. We had this big cinder kind of block of a tunnel that we could climb on or hang out in. And I learned tons of stuff, life lessons hanging out in that tunnel. I learned the truth about Santa Claus in that tunnel, by the way. I was devastated. But on this particular day, Kevin and Randy and I were sitting in the tunnel, and we're making a plan for what we're going to do after school. We're going to ride our bikes to Randy's house, we're going to hang out, and we have our plan, so that's what we do. School ends, we grab our bikes, we meet up at Randy's house. We do what young boys would do in the neighborhood. Ride our bikes, play, and have fun. Street lights start to buzz and come on, we rush home. Next day, we go to school like we always do. We're at that tunnel. We kind of pick on one another, we make fun of one another, then we usually go to class. But on this particular day, Randy didn't show up. And in fact, we would never see Randy again. The night we left Randy after riding our bikes, he was murdered. His family was into some not so good things, and his house was shut up. He was an innocent bystander. And in that tunnel, when I heard that Randy had died, I didn't quite understand what that really meant. Again, I was anxious, I was angry, I was scared. And then the school bell rang. We walk into class, I sit down, I'm still angry and anxious. And I'm sure as my teacher started to teach, she was teaching us some really good things. But I can tell you that I don't remember a word she said that day, probably not that week, and maybe not even that month. Because things that happen in life, in the neighborhood, and in school just goes on and on and on. Sometime years later, Peanut will be murdered. And then DJ, and then Brian. And over and over and over, these young men were victims of gun violence, and they were murdered. And I would ask myself, I always think back to that first incident I described, and I would say, why me? Why wasn't I a young kid standing there as he pulled the gun out, it misfired and went off and shot me, like Randy? When I got to Eastern Michigan University, I knew my friends would always want to come hang out with me, but I was the only one from my neighborhood who was actually there. I wasn't the smartest of the kids in my group, but somehow I was there, so I was asked, why me? When I got to grad school at U of M, there were only 4 black men in my entire program, 2 of which I'd never seen. And I would ask the question, why me? How did I get here? In the work that I do now, I think of names like Keon Washington. I think of the friends and the families of Keandre Duff, of Brandon Cross, of Zachary Curry. And I wonder when their friends and families walk into our schools after an incident like that or years later, what are they actually dealing with and struggling with? And as life in the neighborhood goes on and on and on, as life happens, it seems that our schools just continue to go on and on and on. And again, I share those stories for one reason. They're personal to me. And hopefully they give voice to the young people in our neighborhoods that are really, really struggling. And when they sit in a class, it's not always because they don't care and they're not paying attention. There may be other things that are hanging over them.